Welcome back. We are still on the topic graph of quadratic functions. In the previous video, we learned how to use the graph of a quadratic function to find the solution of another quadratic equation. In this video, we are going to learn how to use the graph of a quadratic function to find the values of x for which y is positive or negative. Finding the values of x for which y is positive, that is y is greater than 0, or negative, that is y is less than 0. So we are going to learn how to use the graph of a quadratic function to find the values of x for which the function y will give us a positive value, that is values of y greater than 0, or a negative value, that is values of y less than 0. Let's learn how to do that. When you draw the x and y axis as we have here, you can see that the x-axis divides the y-axis into two parts, the top part and the bottom part. As we have seen all along, the top part of the y-axis will give us the positive values of y, and the bottom part of the y-axis will give us the negative values of y. Now, when we draw the graph of a quadratic function on this graph sheet, you will see that some part of the function will fall on the positive part of the y-axis and some part will fall on the negative part of the y-axis. So let's say that we draw the graph of a quadratic function on this graph sheet and we have a curve with a U shape like this. You will see that some part of the curve falls on the negative side of the y-axis and some part of the curve falls on the positive side of the y-axis. So on this graph sheet, you will see that the part of the curve that I have colored with red falls on the negative part of the y-axis. It falls on the bottom part of the y-axis, which is the negative part of the y-axis. And the part which I have colored with blue, that is this part and this part, falls on the positive side of the y-axis. It falls on the top part, which is the positive side of the y-axis. So the red part of the curve falls on the negative side and the blue part of the curve falls on the positive side. We are going to learn how to use this graph to find the values of x that will give you the positive values of y and the values of x that will give you the negative values of y. Let's learn how to do that. We can see that on this side of the x-axis, the positive values of y and the negative values of y meet at this x-intercept. And on this side, the positive values of y and the negative values of y meet at this x-intercept. Let's call this x-intercept A and let's call this x-intercept B. Now let's look at something. When you have these two x-intercepts on the x-axis, it divides the set of x values that we have into three parts. This is what I mean. Let's consider this example. Let's say that we have the graph of a quadratic function on a graph sheet like this. We have the x-axis here and we have the y-axis here. And we use a scale of 2 centimeters to 1 unit on the x-axis. So we have something like this. We start from -5 and we end at 4. As you can see clearly on this graph sheet, the x-intercept on the negative side is -2 and the x-intercept on the positive side is 1. So on the negative side, we have the x-intercept to be -2, and on the positive side, we have the x-intercept to be 1. What I'm saying is that these two x-intercepts divide the x values into three different parts. The first part are the set of x values that are on the left-hand side of this x-intercept. So the x-intercept is -2. The first part of the x values will be the x values that are on the left-hand side of -2. The second part are the set of x values that are on the right-hand side of this x-intercept. The x-intercept here is 1. So the second part are the x values that are on the right-hand side of 1. The third part are the x values that are between -2 and 1. So These two x-intercepts will divide the x values into three different parts. The first part are the x values that are on the left hand side of -2. The second part are the x values that are on the right hand side of 1. And the third part are the x values that are between -2 and 1. Now we can see that the x values that are on the left hand side of -2 are all less than -2. We have -3, -4, -5. If you continue, we have -6, -7, and so on and so forth. So on this side of the x-axis, the x values are less than -2. So using -2 as our reference point, we can say that the x values here are less than -2. Now, on this side of the x-axis, we can see that the values of x are greater than 1. We have 2, 3, 4. If you continue, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth. So on this side of the x-axis, all the values of x are greater than 1. Using 1 as our reference point, we can say that all the values on this side of the x-axis are greater than 1. As we have learned, the third part of the x values are between -2 and 1. So for the third part of the x values, they are between -2 and 1. And these values are greater than -2, but less than 1. So we can say that between these two x-intercepts, that is -2 and 1, the values of x are greater than -2, but less than 1. So the values of x are between -2 and 1. Now let's use this same idea to divide the x-axis we have on this graph sheet into three different parts. The first part will be the x values that are on the left hand side of A. As you have seen, on the left hand side of A, the x values will be less than A. So on the left hand side, you have x values less than A. Here the x-intercept was -2, so we had x values less than -2. On this graph sheet, the x-intercept here is A, so you have x values less than A. On this side, we had values of x greater than 1. The x-intercept here was 1. So on the right hand side of 1, we are going to have values of x greater than 1. Here we are having the x-intercept as b. So on the right hand side of b, we are going to have values of x greater than b. Now, the third part will be values of x between a and b. Here we had values of x between -2 and 1. And we are saying that x is greater than -2 and less than 1. Here we are having values of x between a and b. So we have values of x greater than a but less than b. So you can see that using these two x-intercepts, we can divide the x-axis into three different parts. We have values of x less than a, values of x greater than b, and values of x between a and b. We have learned that on a graph sheet, the positive values of y are at the top part and the negative values of y are at the bottom part. And looking at the graph of the quadratic function that we have here, some part of the curve falls on the positive part of y and some part of the curve falls on the negative part of y. On this graph sheet, the positive part of y are the top parts of the curve and the negative part of y are the bottom part of the curve. Now, among these three sets of x values, which ones will give us the positive y values and which ones will give us the negative y values? You can see clearly that the values of x less than a, that is values of x that are on the left hand side of a, and the values of x greater than b, that is values of x that are on the right hand side of b, will give us the top part of the curve, which is on the positive side of the y-axis. This is because if we take any point on this side and we trace it to the curve, it will meet it at the positive side of y. If we take any point on this side and we trace it to the curve, it will meet it at the positive side of y. So the values of x for which y is positive or y is greater than 0 are the x values that are less than a and the x values that are greater than b. If we take a value of x that is between a and b and we trace it to the curve, it will meet the curve at the negative side. So if you take any x value that is between a and b and we trace it to the curve, it will meet it at the negative side of the curve. So values of x for which y is negative or y is less than 0 are values of x greater than a and less than b. So when the graph of a quadratic function has a U-shape like the one we have here, and a is the x-intercept on the left-hand side and b is the x-intercept on the right-hand side, then the values of x that will give you the positive values of y, that is values of x for which y is positive or greater than 0, are x is less than a and x is less than b. And the values of x that will give you the negative values of y, that is values of x for which y is negative or less than 0, are x is greater than a and less than b. What if the graph of the quadratic function has an n shape? How do you find the values of x for which y is positive and the values of x for which y is negative? Let's learn how to do that. If the graph of the quadratic function has an n shape like this one, you will see that the top part of the curve, which I've indicated with red, falls on the positive side of the y-axis, and the bottom part of the curve, which I've indicated with blue, falls on the negative side of the y-axis. Now we can see clearly on this graph sheet that if you want positive values of y, you have to choose values of x between a and b, because between a and b, if we take any x value and we trace it to the curve, it will meet it at the positive side of the y-axis. So you take any x value between a and b, you trace it to the curve, and it will meet the curve at the positive side of the y-axis. So values of x for which y is positive or y is greater than 0 are the values of x that are greater than a and less than b. For values of x for which y is negative or less than 0, you have to choose x values less than a and x values greater than b. Now, let's go over what we have learned in this video. If the curve has a U-shape and the x-intercept on the left-hand side is a and the x-intercept on the right-hand side is b, then the values of x for which y is greater than 0 or y is positive are values of x less than a and values of x less than b. Values of x for which y is less than 0 or negative are values of x between a and b. This is when the curve has a U-shape. When the curve has an N shape like this, then the values of x for which y is greater than 0 or y is positive are values of x between a and b. That is values of x greater than a and less than b. And values of x for which y is negative or less than 0 are values of x less than a and values of x greater than b. You don't have to memorize any of this. I brought this here as a summary of what we have learned in this video. So we have learned that if you want to use the graph of a quadratic function to find the values of x for which y is positive or negative, all you have to do is to locate the x-intercepts. And whether the graph is a U-shape or an N-shape, you can use it to find the values of x for which y is positive or the values of x for which y is negative. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to this channel for more videos. We have learned a lot in this video. In the next video, we are going to apply what we have studied to solve some questions. Bye-bye.